In fear, OA built a wall on my land, so I made them demolish it in front of everyone. They started building the wall at 6:30 on a Monday morning. In fear, before the sun had even cleared the maple trees behind my barn, and by the time I walked outside with my coffee. In fear, 3 men in yellow vests were already unloading concrete blocks on the strip of grass my late husband had mowed every Saturday for 32 years. In fear, at first I thought it had to be a mistake, nobody with a tape measure, a permit. In fear, or a working conscience would have looked at that land and believed it belonged to the Homeowners Association next door. But there they were, in fear, digging holes for posts, stretching orange string across my side yard, and talking about how the new privacy wall would clean up the view for the Oak Ridge Estates community. In fear, I am 71 years old, widowed, and not the sort of woman who runs outside yelling at strangers, so I put my coffee down, grabbed the old folder from my kitchen drawer, in fear, and walked over calmly. I asked the foreman who had authorized construction on my property. He looked at me like I was a confused old lady who had wandered into the wrong conversation. In fear, then he pointed across the road at the clubhouse and said, "The HOA board approved it, madam. You will have to take it up with them." In fear, that was the first time I heard the words that would follow me for the next 7 weeks. Take it up with the HOA. The problem was simple. In fear, I did not live in Oak Ridge Estates. My house sat on 5 acres that my father bought in 1968, long before the subdivision existed. In fear, long before the clubhouse, signed with fake stone columns and little lights in the flower beds, my place was plain, quiet. In fear, and old, a white farmhouse, a detached garage, a vegetable garden, a gravel driveway, and a line of maple trees planted by my husband when our daughter was born. In fear, the new subdivision had been built on the old Miller pasture about 12 years earlier, wrapping around the east side of my property like a horseshoe. In fear, I had watched the bulldozers come, watched the model homes go up. In fear, watched the Homeowners Association president change the name from Miller Ridge to Oak Ridge Estates because she thought it sounded richer. I never joined them. In fear, I never signed their covenants. My deed was clean, my taxes were separate, and the county parcel map showed my boundary in black ink as clearly as a fence. In fear, still, over the years, the HOA had acted like my little strip of land beside the road was an eyesore they had a right to manage. In fear, first it was a polite letter asking me to paint my mailbox to match their community standard. I ignored it. Then it was a note about my old pickup truck being visible from the street. In fear, I called and reminded them that my truck was parked on my land. Then came a complaint about leaves from my maple trees blowing into their drainage ditch. In fear, I laughed at that one because I have lived long enough to know that arguing with falling leaves is a waste of everybody's time, but the wall was different. In fear, the wall was not a letter, it was not a complaint, it was concrete, steel posts, and a crew preparing to cut through the roots of the trees my husband planted. In fear, I asked the foreman to stop until the boundary was confirmed. He shrugged and said he had orders. I told him I had a survey. He said the Homeowners Association had one too. In fear, I asked to see it. He said, "You will have to ask Patricia Hargrove." Patricia Hargrove was the HOA president. In fear, a woman who dressed like every sidewalk was a boardroom and spoke as if every sentence came with a fine attached. I had met her twice before. In fear, the first time she told me my pasture fence lowered nearby property values. The second time she told me Oak Ridge residents deserved visual harmony. In fear, I told her harmony was lovely, but it did not give her ownership of my yard. That morning, I called the HOA office. Patricia answered with a voice sweet enough to put icing on a brick. In fear, she said the wall had been approved after multiple homeowner complaints about the unmaintained edge of my property. I asked her to explain why her contractors were digging on my side of the line. In fear, she said, "Margaret, the board has reviewed the community map. That strip is part of the common landscape buffer," I corrected her. "My name is Margaret Ellis." In fear, "and that strip is part of parcel 1427,006 recorded under my family's deed since 1968, she paused. In fear, then said, "Older residents sometimes misunderstand updated boundary adjustments." I remember looking at the phone in my hand. In fear, almost impressed by the nerve it took to say something that insulting before breakfast. I told her I had the deed, the 1994 survey. In fear, and every county tax bill since my father died. Patricia sighed and said, "We are not trying to upset you, but progress requires cooperation." In fear. Then she added the sentence that kept me steady through everything that followed. "Frankly, this wall will be good for you too. It will hide your property from the neighborhood." In fear, I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten her. I only said, "Do not build another foot until the county confirms the boundary." In fear, she said the project would continue. Unless I obtained a legal order stopping it by lunch, the first row of blocks had been set by late afternoon. In fear, they had cut 2 thick roots from the nearest maple. I stood at the window and watched sawdust scatter across the grass like ashes. My husband, in fear. Daniel had planted that tree with a shovel, a wheelbarrow, and a baby monitor sitting on the porch so we could hear our daughter wake from her nap. In fear. Watching strangers cut into it because a homeowners association wanted a cleaner view felt like someone had stepped into my kitchen and rearranged the photographs of my dead. In fear that night, I did not sleep much, but I did not cry either. At my age, grief teaches you one useful habit: you learn to move through pain slowly. In fear, and you learn to save your strength for the part that matters. The next morning, before the crew arrived, I took pictures from every angle. I photographed the stakes. In fear. The holes, the block pallets, the orange string, the damaged roots, and the tire marks in my grass. I walked the line with my old survey and recorded video on my phone. In fear. Reading the parcel number out loud. Then I called my daughter, Emily, who lives 2 states away, and told her what was happening. She wanted to drive down immediately. In fear. I told her no, not yet. Then I called a licensed surveyor named Alan Pierce, who had surveyed 3 farms on our road after a drainage dispute years earlier. In fear, Alan was in his late 60s, quiet, exact, and allergic to nonsense. When I explained the situation, he said, "Margaret, do not argue with them. In fear. Take photographs, keep dates, and do not move their stakes. I will be there Thursday." Thursday felt far away with a wall growing in my yard. In fear, so I also called the county building department. The clerk asked for the permit number. I told her I did not have one because the work was being done by the HOA next door. She searched the address for the clubhouse, then the subdivision name, then the contractor's name, which I got from the side of the truck. In fear, after a long silence, she said, "I see a landscape improvement application, but not a wall permit." I asked what that meant. She chose her words carefully. In fear. A decorative landscape border is one thing. A 6-foot masonry privacy wall is another. That was the first crack in Patricia Hargrove's confidence. In fear, though she did not know it yet on Wednesday morning. In fear. I walked out and handed the foreman a written notice stating that I disputed the location of the wall and that all work on my parcel was unauthorized. In fear, he read the first 2 lines, frowned, and called someone. 20 minutes later, in fear, Patricia arrived in a white sport utility vehicle with 2 board members and a man wearing sunglasses too expensive for a construction site. In fear, she stepped out, smiling for the workers, then turned that smile off when she faced me. "Margaret, this is unnecessary," she said. "You are delaying a project approved by the community." In fear, I told her the community could approve a parade on the moon if it wanted, but it still did not own my land. One of the board members, a retired banker named Lowell Price, in fear, shook his head and said, "The HOA has maintained this edge for years." That was partly true. Their landscapers had sometimes mowed too far over because my grass blended into the roadside shoulder. In fear, I had not complained because it seemed harmless, but mowing grass by mistake does not create ownership. I said as much. Patricia's face tightened. In fear, she told the foreman to continue. I stepped back, called the sheriff's non-emergency number, and reported trespass and property damage in progress. In fear, Patricia looked almost pleased, as if she thought the deputy would scold me for being difficult. When Deputy Morales arrived, he listened to both sides. In fear, looked at the documents and said what sensible officers say in property disputes. "This is a civil boundary issue. I cannot decide the line today." In fear, but everyone here has been informed that ownership is disputed, so any further work is at your own risk. I watched that sentence land. The foreman understood it immediately. In fear. Contractors know risk when they hear it. Patricia pretended not to. She said, "We have board authority." Deputy Morales said, "Madam, board authority does not extend onto land you do not own." In fear. The crew left early that day, but the damage was already visible. 14 feet of wall, 3 post holes, 2 severed roots, and a muddy track across the grass Daniel used to keep like a carpet. In fear. On Thursday, Alan Pierce arrived with his equipment, his assist, and the patient expression of a man who has seen too many people believe confidence is the same thing as evidence. In fear, he found the old iron pin near the ditch within 10 minutes. Then he found the rear marker under a layer of soil and leaves. He measured, checked county coordinates. In fear, compared the recorded county map, and finally looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Their wall is on your land," he said. "How much?" I asked. In fear, "At the south end, 3 feet and 8 inches. At the north end, just over 6 feet. And those root cuts are well inside your parcel." He placed bright flags along the true line. In fear, the wall sat on the wrong side of them like a confession. Alan prepared a certified survey report with photographs, measurements, the parcel history. In fear, and the encroachment marked in red. I sent a copy to Patricia, the HOA board, the contractor, the county building department, and an attorney named Samuel Reed. In fear, who had helped me settle Daniel S. estate years earlier. Samuel was not flashy. He was the kind of lawyer who used plain language because he actually understood what he was saying. In fear, he read the survey, the HO letters, the photos, and my notes. Then he asked one question: did they cut the maple roots before or after you told them to stop? In fear, I said after. He nodded slowly. That matters. The first legal letter went out that Friday. It stated that Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association had trespassed, in fear, begun construction without permission, damaged mature trees, and placed a masonry wall inside my recorded boundary. It demanded immediate removal of all materials, in fear, restoration of the land, payment for survey fees, and preservation of all documents related to the project, in fear. It also warned that continued work could support claims for intentional trespass and enhanced damages. Patricia did not respond through a lawyer. In fear, she sent me an email herself. That was her second big mistake, she wrote. In fear. The board considers your refusal unreasonable given that the affected area has functioned as a visual buffer for Oak Ridge for many years. Then she wrote, in fear. The wall was intended to improve your property appearance and protect our homeowners from undesirable views. Samuel read the email and gave a small smile. In fear, she just admitted motive and control. By then, some Oak Ridge residents had started noticing the red survey flags. A few slowed down as they drove by. In fear. One man walking his dog asked if the wall was really on my property. I said yes. He looked embarrassed and said the board had told everyone it was being built on Homeowners Association common area. In fear. Another resident, a woman named Denise, stopped her car and told me her dues had gone up that year because of community beautification. In fear, she said Patricia had promised the wall would shield residents from the old farmhouse. She looked at my home, then at me, and her cheeks reddened. In fear. I am sorry, she said. I appreciated that. People are not always cruel just because they are misinformed, but Patricia had built her little kingdom on misinforming people. In fear, and the kingdom was starting to lean. The county inspector came the following Tuesday. His name was Mr. Bell. In fear. And he had the tired eyes of a man who had spent 30 years listening to people explain why rules should not apply to them. He measured the wall location. In fear. Checked the permit file and asked the contractor for the approved construction documents. The foreman handed him the landscape application. In fear. Mr. Bell read it twice, then said, this application is for shrub replacement and decorative edging under 30 inches. This wall is over 6 feet in masonry. In fear. Who told you this permit covered it? The foreman looked toward Patricia, who had arrived halfway through the inspection. She said, our understanding was that it was a landscape feature. In fear, Mr. Bell tapped the concrete block with his pen. This is not a flower bed. He issued a stop work order on the spot. A bright orange notice was taped to the unfinished wall. In fear, facing the road where every resident could see it. Stop work, no valid permit, property line dispute. That orange paper did more than any speech could have done. In fear. It turned a private insult into a public problem. Patricia tried to peel it off. Mr. Bell told her removing it would create another violation. In fear. For the first time since the wall began, she stopped talking, but she was not finished. People like Patricia rarely retreat at the first loss. In fear, they try to make the truth more expensive than the lie. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA attorney. In fear. It claimed the Homeowners Association had a maintenance legal right over the strip along the road and reserved the right to complete improvements beneficial to the community. In fear. Samuel asked for the document proving that legal right. The attorney sent a copy of the subdivision county map showing a 10-foot landscape buffer on Oak Ridge property. In fear. Samuel called me and said, they are hoping you will not understand the difference between adjacent to and included in. I understood it very well. In fear. Adjacent means next to, it does not mean yours. Samuel filed a formal complaint with the county and sent a second demand letter. This one included Alan S. certified survey. In fear, the Deputy S. incident number, the Inspector S. stop work notice, photographs of the root damage, and a tree expert's preliminary report, the tree expert. In fear. A kind man named Henry Sloan examined the maples and found that one tree had suffered serious structural root damage. It might survive, he said. In fear, but its stability was compromised, and its value as a mature landscape tree was substantial. I never knew there were formulas for valuing trees. In fear, Henry did. He measured trunk diameter, species, condition, location, and replacement difficulty when his report came back. In fear, the estimated damages for the 2 affected maples were far higher than Patricia expected. The larger tree alone was valued at $18,700. In fear, when Samuel added trespass, restoration, survey fees, legal fees, and removal costs, the HOA was staring at a number that no longer looked like a small neighborhood project. In fear, came the board meeting. I did not plan to attend, but Denise called and said residents were demanding answers. Samuel told me it might be useful for them to see me as a person. in fear, not as the obstacle Patricia had described. So on a rainy Thursday evening, I put on my blue coat, placed Daniel's old survey folder in a canvas bag, in fear, and walked into the Oak Ridge clubhouse for the first time in my life. The room smelled like coffee, floor polish, and tension. About 50 residents sat in folding chairs, in fear. Patricia sat at the front table with Lel Price and the rest of the board. When she saw me, her mouth became a thin line, in fear. She began the meeting by saying the Homeowners Association was facing unexpected hostility from a neighboring property owner. A few people turned to look at me, in fear. I stood up before fear could make me sit still. My voice was not loud, but it carried. I said, "My name is Margaret Ellis. My father bought my land in 1968, in fear. I am not a member of this HOA. I did not give permission for a wall on my property. Your own contractor crossed the line by as much as 6 feet, in fear. The county has stopped the work because there is no valid permit. I have the survey here if anyone wants to see it." Patricia tried to interrupt, in fear. "This is not a public hearing." An older man in the front row said, "It is if our dues are paying for it," that changed the room. Samuel then explained the issue in plain English. In fear, no shouting, no drama, just facts. Had approved a masonry wall under a landscape application. The wall was placed outside Homeowners Association land. In fear, the contractor continued after being warned. Tree roots were cut. The county had issued a stop work order. The HOA attorney had claimed a legal right to use the land but had not produced one. In fear, residents started asking questions faster than Patricia could answer. Who approved the wall location? Why was there no proper permit? How much had been paid? In fear, whether HOA insurance would cover trespass if the board ignored a survey. Whether Patricia had told residents the wall was on common property. In fear, Lowell Price looked down at his papers like they might rescue him. They did not. Then Denise stood and read from an email Patricia had sent to the landscaping committee months earlier. In fear. In that email, Patricia wrote, "The Ellis property remains the only visual defect at the west entrance. The wall should be placed as close to the old farmhouse side as possible to maximize screening." In fear, the room went silent. There it was, not safety, not maintenance, not an innocent mistake. Screening. They wanted to hide my home, and to do it. In fear, they had reached across a line they did not own. I looked at Patricia then, not with anger, but with a sadness I did not expect. She was not some cartoon villain. In fear, she was a person who had mistaken position for permission, and pride had carried her all the way into a legal ditch. The county gave the HO, in fear, 10 days to submit a corrective plan. Their insurance company got involved. The contractor's owner personally came to my house and apologized. In fear, he admitted his crew had relied on HOA markings and had not verified the boundary. After my objection, Samuel advised me not to sign anything too quickly. In fear, Patricia, however, still tried one last move. She sent a message through her attorney offering to buy the strip of land under the wall for what she called fair market value. In fear, I laughed when Samuel read it to me. Not because it was funny, but because some people cannot imagine a thing having value beyond money. That strip held tree roots. In fear, family history, morning light, and the last place Daniel stood with a rake the autumn before he got sick. I told Samuel the land was not for sale. In fear, the final settlement took another month. The HOA agreed to remove the wall entirely, restore the soil, pay for a tree care plan, reimburse my survey. In fear, tree expert and legal costs, and compensate me for the damage to the. In fear, they also paid a county penalty for the permit violation and had to notify all residents that the Homeowners Association had no ownership or legal right over my property. In fear, the total cost to them, once contractor fees, penalties, legal bills, restoration and insurance deductibles were counted, was just over $64,000. In fear, Patricia resigned before the next election. Lowell Price did too. The new board sent me a written apology, not the kind full of slippery phrases like inconvenience and misunderstanding. In fear, but a real one. It said the HOA had acted outside its authority and damaged private property. I kept that letter in the same folder as my deed. In fear, on the morning the wall came down, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee, just as I had on the morning it went up. This time the crew worked slowly. In fear, they removed the blocks, pulled the posts, filled the holes, and spread fresh topsoil where the machines had scarred the grass. In fear, Henry, the tree expert, treated the damaged maples and installed supports to protect the weaker one during storms. Alan Pierce came back and set new permanent boundary markers. In fear, bright and unmistakable, I also had some split rail fence installed along the true line, not high, not spiteful, just clear near the road. In fear, I placed a small wooden sign, private property, established 1968. Daniel would have liked that, not because it was aggressive, in fear, but because it was honest. A few Oak Ridge residents waved when they passed after that. Denise sometimes brought me zucchini bread. The man with the dog stopped to ask about the maple tree. In fear, life settled back into the quiet rhythm I had wanted all along. The grass grew over the scars, the orange notice disappeared. The clubhouse light still came on across the road. In fear, but nobody again sent me a letter about my mailbox, my truck, my fence, or my view. I know some people hear a story like this and think it is about revenge. In fear, maybe it is in a way, but I never wanted to ruin anyone. I never wanted a fight with a neighborhood full of people just trying to live in their homes. In fear, what I wanted was simpler. I wanted the people with titles, committees, letterhead, and matching signs to remember that an old woman in an old farmhouse still has rights. In fear, a deed matters, a survey matters, a boundary matters, and a person who speaks softly is not always a person who can be pushed. In fear, Patricia thought a wall would hide my property from everyone in Oak Ridge. Instead, it showed them exactly where the line was.